Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your presence, especially during this challenging time when the flooding wave is going through Europe and we can feel the climate crisis in person. My name is Morgan Janowicz, and on behalf of organizers and partner of our session, Green Ref Institute and Diffusion V, I'm delighted to welcome you to this opening session during the European Vegan Summit 2024, and as an operator and initiator of the largest advocacy coalition, Future Food for Climate, which today connects more than 100 civil society organizations. Green Ref Institute is honored to welcome you to our session as part of the European Vegan Summit 2024. We aim to connect experts and leaders in the vegan sector to drive forward these crucial conversations and inspire solutions. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to an engaging and insightful session. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished guest for today's panel, Jay Karandikar. Jay is the principal of the New Crop Capital, where he oversees the fund's portfolio. In addition, Jay is a founder and investment committee member of Ahimsa VC, a fund focused on the investing in animal product alternatives in India. And previously, he worked at hedge funds in the US and Japan. Jay graduated from Princeton University with a bachelor degree in operational research and financial engineering. He's also a director of Wild Earth and Gathered Foods and board observer of JUST. And we're increasingly fortunate to have Jay with us today to share his insights and, of course, expertise. Thank you, Jay, for joining us, and welcome to the European Vegan Summit 2024.
Sure. Thank you, Morgan. Thanks for that kind introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Jay, let's start by forecasting the future. So my first question to you, what will the vegan food market look like in 20 years?
So I would say that I would highlight three trends that I expect to see. So first of all, on the cultivated meat front, I think we've seen some initial launches in Singapore and in the US on small scale for now, but I expect to see more availability in the future, particularly for blended meats. So for example, in a burger, a blend of maybe 20% cultivated meat, 80% plant-based. I think we'll start to see wider scale availability of that, both in restaurants and in grocery stores. Then I would also expect to see the scale up of precision fermentation proteins. So for example, I would expect to see egg proteins made from precision fermentation started to be used in cakes and baked goods and other kinds of applications like that, where the food producer can easily swap in those ingredients without having to involve the consumer, and the consumer gets the same experience at the end of the day. And hopefully the pricing of those ingredients will have come down to the point where it becomes economically viable for those food producers. And then finally, the area which I'm quite excited about, which I hope to see some progress in, is in whole cut plant-based meats. So for example, chicken breasts and steaks. I think we've made a lot of good progress in more ground types of applications like chicken nuggets and burgers. But I think whole cuts are a tougher nut to crack, but I think we are starting to see some companies make progress on that. So I think we're going to start to see better and better products in that category start to come out.
So what does the future of this market depend on? Who will decide its future? Is it consumers, us, or maybe vegan businesses, or maybe policymakers? What do you think?
I would say that at the end of the day, it really does depend on the consumers, because people will have to consciously make some purchasing decision to not buy meat, not buy animal products, and buy vegan products instead. But I think that the important thing to recognize is that consumers don't make their decisions in a vacuum. So people are influenced on a conscious level and on a subconscious level by the environment that they're in. So, for example, if they're going into a restaurant, the order of the menu items matters, the descriptions of the food products matters, the atmosphere that they're in matters. So even if the actual selection of food items on the menu is the same, people will make different choices depending on all of these cues. So I think that's where these other players come into the picture is if there's a different selection of products available because vegan businesses are starting to make better products that influences consumers' behavior. If there's different pricing because governments change the subsidies, that will, of course, influence the consumer behavior. So I would say consumers matter most. They're the ones who will shape the future of our food system, but there are things that everyone else can do to influence their behavior.
Thank you very much, and I can already see that some questions are coming in already. Thank you very much. If you're with us on Zoom, please use the Q&A section to send us your question. And going to the next question, Jay, one of the biggest challenges is the downturn in funding for vegan startups, and this not only creates a barrier to starting a new ventures, but also threatens the existence and operation of already established startups. And additionally, it aggravates inequality in the market between heavily founded animal agriculture and vegan businesses. At the same time, most countries do not have policies that support vegan food businesses, and public funds such as those from the EU's Common Agricultural Policy, strongly support the animal agriculture sector. In your opinion, which factors, such as location, internalization, level of development, sales channels, communication, R&D, pricing policy, have the greatest impact on the survival of vegan businesses?
I would say that at this point in time, especially out of the factors you mentioned, probably pricing matters the most because of the environment that we're in, as you mentioned. I think that there was a point in time a number of years ago, maybe around 2017 or 2018, when there was a lot of venture capital funding flowing into this space. And so companies could operate without a positive margin because they could hope to raise a future round of funding. But now I think we're in quite a different environment. So I think companies need to have sustainable pricing models. They need to figure out how to get to a positive cash flow because they can't rely on financing in the financial environment that we're in. And so, unfortunately, to some extent, R&D might have to take a bit of a back burner for a lot of companies. I think for the long-term flourishing of our space, of course, R&D is going to be important. I think we need to come up with innovative new products. But I think the top priority for a lot of companies right now is getting to a sustainable financial model.
So if you had to point out 3 weaknesses of the vegan industry and 3 of its strengths, what solutions do you see in the context of the weaknesses you pointed out?
So one weakness I would point to is that I think that there was a popular idea, which definitely has some truth to it, that we just need to get products that will compete on price, taste, and convenience, and then consumers will switch. And I do think that those are the 3 most important factors. But I think that in the short term, to get the product off the ground, you need to find a segment of consumers who really love your product and market to them. It can't just be your marketing strategy can't be that this is a product for everyone. You need to, and because the thing is that different people will respond to different messages more strongly. So is this for people who really love whole foods, plant-based diets, and are really health conscious? Is this for environmental consumers? Is this for men who like grilling? Is it for whatever the customer base is? I think defining the target consumer clearly and then tailoring your marketing messages towards them. I think that has been a weakness. I think hopefully companies can start to get better. I think so. That's the first one. The second one, I would say um, there have been some amazing products that have come out, but unfortunately, because the space was so hot, there have been unfortunately some products which were also not so great out there, and especially for consumers who just hear about uh, the rise of plant-based and they just go out and try one of them. If they have a negative experience, then they may not be inclined to try other products. So um, I think it's starting to get better, but I would say that that's the second weakness. I would say the third is because it's a nascent industry, we have lack of scale. So a lot of companies need to look for co-manufacturers. They don't have their own manufacturing facilities, and that makes their products more expensive than the counterparts. So because it's really difficult to find a good co-manufacturer, that's a challenge for a lot of companies. Um, so I would say lack of solid, reliable manufacturing capacity would be the third weakness.
So, Jay, let's stay a bit with the SWOT analysis of the vegan economy for a moment, and let's talk about the medium term. Let's say over the next 5 years, what opportunities and threats do you see for it?
So, in terms of the opportunities, I would say that we talked about the difficulties with the lack of funding, but I think there's also a flip side of the coin that also um, creates an opportunity because the companies that are able to weather the storm maybe will have increased market share. So maybe they'll have an easier time going forward. The second I would say is that I do think that government funding is starting to open up. So it's still on a small scale right now, but there have been some USDA grants in the US. I think there's some progress happening in Europe. So I think hopefully that can start to help these companies. And then also some of the big food service companies like Sodexo, they've started to make commitments about offering plant-based options because they recognize that's important for meeting their climate goals. So I think that these kinds of companies will be more receptive to buying plant-based products. So I think that's going to be a good sales opportunity for companies in the space. In terms of threats, I would say one challenge is the meat industry has gotten pretty aggressive at messaging against us, and especially on the health front, I would say of attacking products as being ultra processed or having ingredients that they don't like. Well, I think, of course, there's a spectrum of products. Some are more on the whole food side and are more healthy. Other products are more indulgent. But I think that the claims that the meat industry proponents are definitely over the top and not substantiated. So I think that's a threat for our industry to deal with, is to figure out a way of how to respond to these and make sure that consumers are not overly turned off by these messages.
So let's go back to the consumers a bit. From your observation, what is the key motivation for the new consumers to reach out to the vegan options? Is it animal rights, health, climate? And do you see any changes here over the last few years?
I think that out of those three, I think health is probably the biggest motivator. And I think that explains, for example, why burgers have been the category that has worked the best so far, because people can recognize that red meat is particularly unhealthy. And so they're looking for alternatives. So when they see plant-based alternatives that are healthy, that's appealing to them. I would say climate would be secondary, and then unfortunately animal rights third. I mean, animal rights is my primary motivation, but in terms of the majority of consumers, I would say unfortunately that comes third. But in terms of a change over the past few years, I would say climate is starting to become more and more of a motivator. But I think it also depends where you're talking about. I'm coming more from a US perspective. I think in Europe, climate is more of a motivator for more people than it is in the US. But I still think at the end of the day, if you had to pick one, I think health is probably going to be the biggest motivator.
Is there a country or maybe countries that deserve to be called leaders in the vegan economy today? And are they a powerful in this industry? Are companies located in this country setting a new trends? Are they betting on innovation? How does it look like?
In terms of where startups are located, I would say the one country that really stands out is Israel. I think the number of companies that have come out of there has been pretty amazing, especially in cultivated meat and in fermentation. So, for example, companies like Aleph Farms, and I think part of that is also government support. The Israel Innovation Authority has been supporting governments. There's a food tech incubator called The Kitchen there, which has helped to support a lot of these companies. There's some good food tech conferences. So I would say that in terms of startups. In terms of the consumers, the two countries that I see most promising are the UK and Germany. I think Veganuary has really taken off in the UK. Germany, it's amazing to see all the vegan consumers there. So I think those are good markets for companies to sell to.
And you have already mentioned that you bring a great perspective from the US. So I wanted to ask you, do you see any fundamental differences between the vegan economy in the USA and Europe? Because the European Union is the economy that is comparable to that of China. And do you think that it compares to the vegan industry?
I would say that so one thing which I touched on earlier is that consumers are much more motivated in Europe to try to do something to help the environment. In the US, you have a significant percentage of people who aren't even bought into the idea of climate change. So it feels like the discussion is on a much further back than it is in Europe. So I think that creates an opportunity for people to take advantage of that motivation and to give people concrete ways that they can help the environment through their diet. And I think Europe is also catching up in terms of the innovation. I think the first wave of this most recent period of vegan companies took place in the US, particularly in California. But now there are quite a number of innovative European companies who are creating new vegan products. So I think Europe is approaching the US in that regard also.
So what do you think, which part of the vegan economy will grow the fastest in the coming years? Fashion, food, cosmetics, services, or maybe something else?
I think food is the most promising area. I think that there will be exciting things happening in those other areas too. So, for example, I know some precision fermentation companies have been looking at cosmetics because the margins that they can get in cosmetics are much higher than they can get in food. So they're looking at potentially using that as their initial market before they move to food. I think in materials, uh, there's the most interesting area there is to see alternatives to animal-based materials that also don't have other environmental consequences because, for example, some of the uh, alternatives that exist currently have issues with microplastics, which can leak out to the environment. And even if they're not directly made from animals, they can still harm animals out in the environment. So there are all kinds of issues there. But I think that there's a newer generation of more natural materials that don't have those issues. So I think it'll be exciting to see those scale up. But I still think food is just is such a massive market, and it's universal. Everyone has to eat. That's just a fundamental human need. So the market potential is massive if we can crack that code.
And looking at the future, what key market trends do you think will drive the vegan economy in 2025? What do you think the new market players, vegan startups, or existing companies that want to enter the market in 2025 should know and keep in mind?
So one market trend is trying to make the products a bit more healthy. For example, Beyond Meat has experimented with this. They're trying to release some sausages that are that will appeal more to health-focused consumers. And I think this is a response to the threat that I mentioned earlier that now, because of the negative messaging, people are starting to doubt whether they should be really consuming some of these newer products. So I would say that I think that's a priority for vegan companies that they're trying to innovate and try to release products that will address some of those concerns that people have. But the biggest trend is that I would expect the issues in fundraising and in financing to, I mean, no one can really predict, but I would assume that it will continue at least for the first half of 2025. So I think that companies are going to have to adapt to that, and hopefully some of them are in profitability already, but try to get to profitability as fast as possible to be able to weather that storm. And then at some point, the capital markets will change. There are always cycles, and hopefully they can raise money maybe in the second half of 2025 to focus more on R&D.
Thank you very much. And I can see that more questions are coming in, but before we move on to the Q&A session, there's one more question. What bad scenarios do you see ahead for the vegan economy? If you could share some insights or some thoughts on that.
I think that I could draw maybe an analogy here. So I think right now in the field of AI, as everyone knows, we're seeing a big boom in companies. We're seeing a lot of very useful products coming out, and a lot of excitement from investors also to invest in those kinds of companies. So now we're seeing an AI spring, but there have been in the field of AI what people call AI winters. These periods in time where people got very discouraged with AI. They questioned whether it would really have a big impact on society. So there are different periods of time that get called AI winters. One of them happened in the 1990s, for example. Eventually, of course, things do turn back around, and people start to see the potential again. People starting startups in that field, but the problem in that field is that uh, those kinds of cycles can delay the progress. So I think it would be really a shame for something like that to happen in our vegan industry, where people get discouraged. People, some companies unfortunately go bankrupt, and people get put off from trying to innovate, from trying to start new companies, trying to create new products. Um, of course, people will eventually come back and will eventually create those products, but um, that can cause a delay in the change that we want in shifting to a plant-based food system. So I would say that's the scenario that I would want to avoid. Uh, and I think the way that we avoid it is by being very cost conscious and focusing on the margins and on the finances.
Jay, thank you very much. And now let's open the floor to our further discussion, and let's move to the audience questions. And the first question: what we can do to influence consumers to buy more and more vegan food?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that the biggest thing in my mind is to target the messages. So I think that this is similar to some of the earlier comments that I made, but rather than trying to influence people as a whole, I think that we'll make much more traction by trying to influence one group of people at a time. So, for example, we know that there are some people who are very health conscious, or maybe people who are facing health concerns of their own, diabetes, heart disease, and so on. So targeting a message that really caters to that group of people, and then that message is not going to resonate with someone else who's maybe 20 years old, who has no health concerns, heart disease feels too distant to them. That's maybe just going to bounce right off of them. But so I would say that I think we need to get better at tailoring our message for the different target markets. And then the second area that I think is promising is using behavioral science and choice architecture to get people to shift their behavior without having to convince them. We can have vegan defaults, like what's happening now in New York City in the hospitals. Then we can get people to shift their purchases via a much quicker route.
Thank you very much. There's another question from Danya Hemadi. Thank you very much for sending your question. It says, I don't know if everyone will agree with this or not, but milk and milk products, not meat, are embedded in Indian culture. Why is it?
Yes, that is very much true. Absolutely. I would say it has to do with the long history of religion and culture. Milk is used in a lot of Hindu religious rituals. And there's almost a popular idea that you need milk to survive or to thrive, which is of course not true, but that's a very popular myth that's embedded in the culture. And people can speculate about sociological reasons. Maybe back in ancient times, cows were very important to the economy, 2,000 years ago, and maybe that got embedded in the culture. But it is definitely right. And this is a perfect example where maybe if you create a product that is better on price, taste, and convenience, there might be a hardcore group of people who still want the dairy milk because of those reasons. So I think in that case, we're going to have to come up with a better message. It's not going to be so simple as just competing on price, taste, and convenience.
And there's also a question, what do you mean by bad consumer experience? Do you mean taste, if products is almost the same as meat or animal dairy, or price?
So I would say the aspects of consumer experience that matter the most are we could separate into two pieces. So there's actual flavor, which in some cases is actually not so difficult. There are the big flavor companies like, for example, Givaudan, who produce flavors that you can add into your plant-based meats. But another challenge is texture. So even if you have a great flavor, you still need to get the right texture, the right mouthfeel that will replicate that consumer experience people are expecting. And so I think there are a few promising companies working on that. So for example, one, Demolished Foods in India, is working on creating fibers that can have the same properties as animal muscle fibers. So then they can put those fibers together into bundles, put the bundles together into a chicken breast, for example. And by using that bottom-up process, they can create this a texture in a much better way that, for example, an extruded product can. So those are a few of the components of the consumer experience to look out for.
I think there's also a complementary question. So Jay, you're driving the change towards adopting vegan alternatives. In which areas has vegan food not yet caught up or isn't as competitive compared to animal-based products?
I think the biggest one that I see so far is fish. Some companies have been trying, but the rate of adoption in plant-based fish is much less than it is in beef, in plant-based beef, for example, which is very unfortunate because in terms of the number of animals affected, fish is of course a much greater number. But I think one of the issues there is that there's much less natural demand because a lot of people look at fish as healthy. Of course, in reality, there are issues with heavy metals and so on. But whereas a lot of people look at beef as unhealthy, they know it's unhealthy. So if someone tells them, I have an alternative for you that tastes similar, in their minds, there is a good reason to buy that product. Whereas a lot of people are not there yet with fish. They're not naturally seeking out alternatives to fish to the same degree. But hopefully in the coming years, some of the companies, like for example, Oshi is a company out of Israel that's working on plant-based fish. So hopefully these kinds of companies can start to get more traction.
And another one is from Erin. In geographic terms, where do you find there's the most interest in transitioning to plant-based options?
I think that there are a few hotspots in the US. So, for example, I think Los Angeles is a hotspot, but there's a lot of places in the US that are not hotspots for veganism. But I think really the three most promising countries I see are the UK, Germany, and Israel. I think in those three places, I think we see the highest percentage of vegans and the most vegan restaurants per capita and just the most excitement about consuming vegan products.
Thank you so much, Jay. And there's a question and a comment from Sandy. aren't we losing the point of why veganism is important rather than talking from the economic, so making profit point of view?
Yes, I think that is a valid concern for sure because at the end of the day, for me, and I think for a lot of people, veganism is fundamentally about compassion, about not harming animals and letting animals be. So it's really a mindset shift. And for a lot of people, maybe even a spiritual experience. So if someone is just going to a grocery store and swapping this product for that product without having that change in consciousness, then I do think maybe we're not getting the full value of veganism that we would like ideally. But I don't think at the same time, I don't think that they're necessarily fully at odds with each other because I think if we can make it easier for people to change their diet, because I think the problem right now is that a lot of people are so caught up in consuming animal products, it's a part of their identity, and so they get very defensive when people try to challenge that. But if people already can shift their diets a little bit, can start buying different products, and it's easier for them to do that, then I think that does bring down their level of defensiveness. Then then their minds are more fertile. Then they can start to maybe listen more to those messages about compassion. And so hopefully these companies, these startups, will make it easier for the compassion message to spread.
And there's another one. Do you have any information on where Canada is aligned comparably with other countries in interest in turning plant-based options and what the reasoning percents are?
That's a good question. I don't have concrete numbers on that. My assumption is that it's probably similar to the US, but I don't know for sure. But I would say the one interesting thing that I do know about Canada is that Canada is a big producer of the ingredients that a lot of vegan companies use. So, for example, pea protein. And also, the government of Canada has given grants to support the creation of these pea protein facilities. So, for example, a number of US companies are purchasing their pea protein from Canada. And there are also some startups. So, for example, New School Foods is a plant-based fish startup in Canada. So yeah, so it's exciting to see at least the vegan industry getting established there.
And what's a common branding or positioning mistake you see in companies who offer vegan products?
I think that some of these startups maybe take inspiration from the tech world. For example, maybe they have Silicon Valley venture capital investors, or maybe they're based in Silicon Valley themselves. And so they maybe focus on the technology, which I think can be exciting, but um, they focus on maybe the innovation and almost in an analogous way to software. But I think that is exciting, but I don't think that is the kind of brand messaging that appeals to a large number of customers, because when people think about food, a lot of the times they don't think about it as technology, even though in modern agriculture there is a lot of technology involved. They like to think of food maybe as natural, maybe they have an idyllic picture of food. So when companies use technology focused messages, that might, I think, rub people the wrong way, because people like to think my food is natural, my food comes from the earth. Um, I think that those kinds of messages are maybe more appealing to people.
Moving on to the next question, there's Bronny who is asking vegan food or food diet allowed for vegan vegetarian people? How do you see it?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Um,
I think Bronny meant is it how do you see the vegan food? Do you see it as a diet or the group of food that is allowed for vegan vegetarian people, which can be some sort of sometimes limitation for some people, and there's a
I see.
great variety of foods.
I see. I see. Well, I look at veganism as really a philosophy or a frame of mind or as a way of living your life that hopefully um, goes beyond just being restrictive. That I think, ideally, if people truly understand veganism, it's actually elevating themselves. That they are living more meaningful lives by being compassionate to all sentient beings. But I do think that that brings up an interesting point that I actually don't think that vegans are the biggest target market for vegan companies. So, for example, I think most of the people buying Beyond Burgers are not vegan. So um, that could also be a branding mistake. To go back to the previous question, also, uh, I think vegans are going to form the core consumers who are going to be most excited about it. But I think that companies I should hopefully be welcoming, and that at the end of the day, every bite is an opportunity. So if someone is flexitarian and wants to shift one meal to being vegan, the brand should be appealing to those kinds of people also.
Thank you very much. And because we're going to the end of our session, there will be last three, and if we have time for questions. So I'll go to the next one. From an economic perspective, how can Europe support African initiatives that popularize plant-based diets, particularly in terms of investment, market access, and capacity building? Are there specific economic incentives or partnerships that could help bridge the gap between European demand for plant-based products and Africa's potential to supply them?
So there's an initiative in Nigeria, Niger Veg, which is focused on plant-based food there. So, and the founder of that organization also started a plant-based meat company. So if you're interested in that, you may want to reach out to that organization. And I don't Africa is not my really area of expertise, but I think there are definitely people out there in the continent who are focused on it. So hopefully those kinds of connections will be helpful.
And how can we counter health beliefs of vegan consumers that are based on misinformation about the processed vegan foods and their ingredients without inviting opposition?
So I think one message that might be compelling is that the meat industry in reality is pretty gross. It's a pretty nasty process, and so I think that transparency is helpful because that's also something that can distinguish our industry from the animal industry, because um, the meat industry does not want people to know how their products are made, and they are, for example, in the United States and I think elsewhere, also trying to pass these ag-gag laws to prevent people from sharing footage inside factory farms and so on. So I think we can try to create the opposite approach of try to be transparent, try to explain exactly how the process works. we can show people video footage of our facilities, and there's nothing to hide. Um, and some of the technologies have been around for some time. They're totally safe. So we can show people exactly what the process is, how it all works, and also point out that this is very different from how the meat industry operates, that they do have something to hide. I think people will be able to see that difference, and hopefully that will help to put their minds at ease.
Thank you, Jay. I'm sorry for taking your time, but there are so many questions, great questions. Let me ask you two last questions, and we'll finish off with the session. There's a question from Sandy, question and comment. Could we not start programs to inform and challenge the general public to a shift?
Yes, definitely. I think we can, and we should. I think that there are lots of great documentaries, like for example, Seaspiracy. I think was a very powerful documentary in recent years. I think The Game Changers was a documentary that exactly as you're saying helped to shift attitudes. That people have an idea that to be a high performing athlete, you need to consume meat, but The Game Changers help to show that that's not true. So I think there's an important role for those kinds of initiatives to challenge people's preconceived ideas, and I think that they go hand in hand with what the vegan companies are doing. That once those beliefs have been challenged, then the vegan products are out there, so they can actually take action with their new beliefs and buy the vegan products instead.
There's a question from Bogusław. Poland has been making strides in various aspects of veganism, from plant-based food options to activism. At the Vegan Summit, how do you see Poland's role in the global vegan revolution? What unique contributions or challenges does Poland bring to the movement?
Mm. Mm. Yes, I definitely have been hearing about some great activism happening, and Poland is a large country. It's an important country with a large number of consumers. So I think that the challenge and the opportunity will be to create the unique products that will appeal to Polish consumers, because every country has its own palate, its own unique national dishes. So I don't think it's going to be as so easy as just importing products from foreign countries. That may not be the best path. So I think that there's a big opportunity for Polish entrepreneurs to create plant-based products that people will recognize, people will be familiar with, and people also like supporting local companies. So I think that that creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs.
And I said this is going to be a last question. So this question is from Urvashi Dalmont. I have seen people focused on vegan products that replace animal products, but I remain a strong proponent of a whole food plant-based. Why do people keep forgetting those foods that are the real nutritious foods we need to grow from the soil, and not the other that are heavily processed in factories? How can we make minds shift in that direction? And how can we economically help farmers focus on this right agricultural practice?
So I think that the whole foods plant-based diet, from all the research I've done, is the best diet in terms of health. And I think ideally people should be shifting to consuming more fruits and vegetables and improving their health. And I think some people are open to that. They just need the right information. And sometimes that happens after a health scare, maybe after someone has a heart attack. Then they start to become motivated to do more research on that. But I think this comes back to one of my earlier points of really defining the consumer segment. So I think for the people who are willing and ready at this point in their lives to make this shift to a more healthy diet, I think we should give them all the resources to enable them to consume a whole foods plant-based diet. But some percentage of people are not ready, unfortunately. So for those people, then we can give them meat alternatives, and they can have that for the time being, and then hopefully at some point in the future, then they will be ready to shift to a whole foods plant-based diet. And maybe also for some people, the meat alternatives can serve as a stepping stone. Maybe they can first switch to that, and then later on shift to whole foods plant-based. But if you to address the last point about how to support the farmers, there have been some groups working on this. So, for example, Mercy for Animals has the transformation project. They're trying to help farmers shift from animal agriculture to plant-based agriculture or growing mushrooms. So there are some initiatives. So if you're interested in that topic, I would suggest connecting with those groups.
Thank you very much, Jay, for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. I know that there are 7, 8 questions that we didn't have time to answer, but maybe another time. Jay, thank you so much for your perspective on the vegan food market and the challenges, but also opportunities for the investment and the evolving consumer behavior and its future. So once again, thank you all for your participation. Let's of course continue to collaborate and drive forward to change we wish to see in the world. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. And please do not forget to check our website and follow GreenRef Institute actions, campaigns, and programs. Jay, once again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.